Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tauhida Wahabzada, and I am based in Toronto, Canada. I used to be a DACA recipient from 2012 to February 2020, and I am one of the co-founders of Departed Dreamers, a network of dreamers and DACA recipients who chose to leave the US or are considering leaving the US. I'd like to introduce you to Jason and Monsi, who are also the co-founders of Departed Dreamers. Jason and Monsi, please feel free to introduce yourselves.
So I guess I'll go first. I'm Monsi Hernandez. I'm also one of the co-founders of Departed Dreamers. I was documented for approximately 3 years in South Carolina, and I'm now based in Germany.
Jason, would you like to introduce yourself? Jason? I think Jason may have some... Oh, he's having issues with his audio. Sorry about that. Well, I hope that's resolved.
Hi, sorry about that.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
Is it my turn to introduce myself?
Yes.
Hi guys, my name is Jason. I was a formal DACA recipient and left the United States in 2019 to come to Spain for pursue a higher level education. And right now, after graduating the programs, I'm currently pursuing 2 startups in Spain. Nice to meet you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. For some housekeeping rules, please mute yourselves throughout the session. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Beleza Chan. Belleza is a Brazilian Chinese global citizen. After living in the US for 7.5 years from high school until post-university, and without hopes of seeing immigration reform passed, she decided to return to Brazil. Later, she moved to China for an MBA program. Belleza recently returned to the US after her family's petition and the 10-year bar waiver were approved. She currently started her own educational technology startup to help children learn English using AI technology. At Immigrants Rising, she co-led Life Outside of the U.S. project, an initiative focused on empowering undocumented youth to consider fulfilling their human potential outside of the United States. Belleza, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I want to start by introducing myself and my story and my journey to the US, out of the US, and then back to the US again. But I just wanted to know, if you guys can just write in the chats, what's your situation in terms of your exploration of life abroad? Is are most of you already outside of the US, or most of you considering coming to the US? And then I could watch the chat, but I'll bring my map in, or I'll just bring it in. Okay. Thank you, Monsi. Okay, oops. Hold on a second. Okay, okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Okay, I think we have, let's say, most people. Okay, I would say it's pretty even, with, I guess, a bit of a heavier side on the already left the US. Okay, let me bring this to the front. Why is it not coming? 1 second. Sorry, technical difficulties here. All right. So I brought the map because I've been like, I think my journey has been like a full circle already. And I think it's a way for me to share my experience and like my way of like leaving the US and then coming back has been like so different that I think like I can just cover the different alternatives that are out there for those who are exploring leaving the US, but also the ones that are exploring returning to the US, because I've come back in different ways as well. So like I was introduced, I'm from Brazil, from São Paulo. It's a city and state in the southeast of Brazil, but my immigrant story starts before that. My parents actually immigrated to Brazil from China, and I was born in Brazil. So actually my immigration story, like my time in the US is actually the second time living in like an immigrant culture. So I was born in Brazil. Life was difficult in the beginning because my parents were recent immigrants. They didn't speak the language. And I was their first child, which also meant that I would be their official translator since like I learned how to speak because they couldn't do better. In Brazil, my parents had the support of my dad's family, and they were able to open a restaurant, and that was like our main source of living in Brazil. It was an okay life, a working class life, except for the fact that my mom was a victim of violence in Brazil a couple of times. Like she was attacked like at gunpoint in a couple of robberies. So in her mind, Brazil was not a safe place for us to grow up in. And she always like explored different paths for us to grow up and be successful. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Sorry. At one point, she got reconnected to her family members who had immigrated from China to the US. And that's when the light bulb and the idea of like going to the US became a possibility. The family members in the US said that we could just go to the US on any kind of visa. And if we studied and graduated, we would be able to, stay in the US. And then like my mom believed that, and we were taken to the US. Of course, like we were young, my siblings and I were young, and we had no idea what was happening. We just thought like we're going to the US to study. And we went, next. We went to San Francisco in 2002. And that's where I attended high school. And I think it was like around senior year when you take that class, college class or something that prepares you to apply for university. And that was when I realized that I didn't have the proper visa, the proper documents to attend university in the US, or actually to be able to afford university in the US, because you're able to attend as long as you can pay in the US. So I realized that I would be an international student in the US because I came a little after age 16, wasn't going to be eligible for AB 540, which is like the in-state tuition in California, or the DREAM Act, or any of that. I just knew that like it would be like an uphill battle for myself. I graduated from high school. I was like top of my class, but I decided to attend community college because that's what I could afford, and that would allow me to babysit on the side and like save money, because my plan was still like to attend a 4-year university. few years passed, completed all my general courses, and then I was able to transfer, to be accepted to UC Berkeley and transfer, which was like a very exciting moment, but it was also a very like expensive moment because I had to, like if I wanted to attend, I had to pay out-of-state tuition, like I had to pay like what an international student would pay. And because of my couple of years working as a babysitter, I was able to save enough to pay for one semester at UC Berkeley. So I did, like, take all my money. They did. And then my plan was like, oh, I'll slowly like save up again and like apply for different scholarships and then maybe drop out a semester, work and come back and so on. Luckily, I was able to find like amazing communities out there that were able to help me with scholarships, and eventually I was able to get like a full ride that covered like my whole like tuition, and I was able to graduate in time. At around that time, my family was able to get permanent residency. Like my mom got her green card, and then my siblings were also able to get their green card. But I was 22, so I again like missed the cutoff because I had to be 21 to be able to fall under my mom's business. Oops. Okay. So I became like the only undocumented person in my family. Around that time as well, financial crisis, like everyone graduating, having like a really hard time finding jobs. I also struggled, and I also felt that like I didn't have many choices, and I was like feeling just like really stuck, even though like I had just graduated and like that's normal. I think for me it was like just like I worked so hard, right? Like I've saved everything and I've given everything for my education, and still like I can't fulfill my potential. And at around that time, I part of like immigrants organizing like communities. Like I met someone who actually like left the U.S. That was like back in 2008. There was like one person who I knew like left for Canada for a graduate program, and then he was like sharing like that in Canada, like if you finish your degree, you can get like a work permit, and then after that you could become a resident and then a citizen and everything. And I was like, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna follow his footsteps. And then I decided to apply for university in Canada for a graduate program. I got accepted, and then I decided that it was time for me to leave the U.S. because I was gonna, be in charge of my future, in charge of my destiny. So in 2010, I decided to go back to Brazil because from my understanding at that time, for me to get a Canadian visa, I would have to be in a country that I had residency, and I didn't have it in the US, so I had to go back to Brazil. The problem is that like when you leave the US after having overstayed your visa or like having not being like in a legal way, like you are barred for 10 years from returning to the US. But I was like, I'll be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. I think this comes from like, being like 24 years old and like you think you're invincible. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna leave the US. That's part of the plan. And I'll go to Canada, and Canada's not that far from the US. So everything will be okay. What I did not account for is that they can deny your visa, and then you are just stuck in your country. And unfortunately, that's what happened to me. So I returned to Brazil to apply for a visa to go to Canada, but the visa was denied because they said I do not have enough ties to Brazil, and that they were afraid that the visa people in Canada, they were afraid that I was going to overstay in Canada and become an undocumented immigrant in Canada. So I was denied a visa, and that was like a moment. That was like a turning moment in my life of like, what am I gonna do? Because that was my plan, and then like things are completely changed, and what's the future gonna be like? But like after the shock, I decided that Brazil is not the worst place. There are many people that go to Brazil for to lead a better life, like my parents themselves, right? They immigrated from China to Brazil to have a better life, and there are lots of people in Latin America that go to Brazil, so there are definitely opportunities. And in Brazil, I started working and traveling, and I think like for those who have left, you know that for those two main things, I think like from being undocumented, right? Like traveling and like having a passport and not being worried about like getting on a plane, going on an airport, like having any encounter with an authority figure. That's like a weight lifted off your shoulder. But also working, right? To suddenly have like all the documentations and like they are not fake documents. It's also like a relief that you are able to be a whole person. Okay, maybe your life is not as comfortable as it was back in the U.S. And maybe you're not making as much money as you were making before, but like you don't have fear, which I think is a big part of like why. Yeah, I think that's like a big like, eye-opening event when you leave the US and you realize you're whole, right? My job in Brazil, because it was like supporting Brazilian students that wanted to go to the US, I had quite a few opportunities to actually like travel to the US. And again, being naive and not knowing how hard things are, I like when I got to Brazil, I think in 2010, I think in like 2011, before 2012, I applied for a tourist/business visa to return to the US. And I was able to be granted a waiver. So I did not have to like face the 10-year bar, right? That like for 10 years, you're not able to return to the US. I was actually able to travel to the US for a conference. And then I also visited my family after staying in Brazil for a couple of years. And I was able to like renew that visa throughout my like 9 years abroad. I was able to get 3 US visas to visit the US. So I was able to see my family every couple of years. And like luckily for me, like my family could also visit me. After a few years in Brazil, I decided that I wanted something else, that I wanted to go back to school. And that was when I decided to go to China, Beijing, more specifically, to do an MBA. So China was also a very interesting place. It's like growing immensely. It's like now a super large economy, I think like larger than the US. And that very different from the time that my parents lived in China, the place of opportunities. So after my MBA, I was able to get a job at a tech company that became like one of the largest in education in China. And that was like a very intense experience that shaped the career that I have right now, or like the startup that I have right now. After in China as well, I was able to meet my now husband, who's an Indian national. And yeah, now we're like happily married. And I like sometimes I reflect on my life and I'm like, I had no idea that I would end up like this. I was like for the last almost 3 years, I've been a founder at a startup that's based out of New Zealand. My co-founder that I met during my time in China, like she and I decided to start a startup using technology to help kids learn English rather than use teachers to teach English. During that time, my green card was also approved, and in 2018, and that's when I started this whole process to immigrate to the US. But because I had not completed the 10 years, I had to apply for the hardship waiver, which is like the 10-year bar waiver for immigrating, for getting a green card, not just getting a visa to the US. That also was a long process. It took me 8 months to get everything sorted out. And in September of 2019, that's when I was able to get an immigrant visa. And I think I got my green card in the mail like October of 2019. So oh yeah, it's been 2 years since then, and pandemic happened and everything in the middle. Nowadays, I am going between San Francisco and Hong Kong because that's where my husband's working at right now. And yeah, now I feel that, and now I am applying for my husband to immigrate to the US. So I kind of feel like I've done full circle and I'm bringing someone along with me for the next step of the journey. So like the other side of like the immigration process. And in a nutshell, this is my story. I know we will cover more specific questions about life abroad and like the waivers and everything, but I think this is like just, yeah, a bit of a snippet of like the different possibilities, right? And how big your world can be, like not just limited to the US, right? Like the world is huge and there's like a lot of possibilities, and you could feel that like you can't come to the US and it's so important, but you can go to the rest of the world, right? And isn't that freeing? So yeah, that's me. That's the beginning of the talk.
Thank you so much for presenting, Belleza. You are indeed a global citizen, and just your experience abroad shows your full potential of what you can do outside of the US. And thank you once again for sharing your story. I am going to go ahead and stop the recording before we start our Q&A session.